Hi,
Alrighty. Hi.
it worked.
It worked. I had 30
Let me see
seconds
if
of
I can
panic.
get. Me
How
too.
are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. It's very good to see your face.
Yeah, you
Um,
too.
Nice to see everyone joining. I'm Caitlin McKenna, an editor at Random House.
And I'm Katy Nishimoto, an editor at the Dial Press, which is an imprint of Random House.
Yeah, so in normal days, we work right down the hallway from each other and can talk about these things all day, every day. But we're going to make do with this right now.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we're here to talk about queer fiction, queer editing, and book editing and publishing in general. So please ask questions, give comments. We want to hear from you. And yeah, happy to be here.
me too.
So we thought maybe we could kick things off by talking about uh, the queer books that were formative to us or influenced us as kids, as adults, as editors, anything. Um, and I was sitting down to think about this last night, and I remembered this anthology. I see someone asking, what is queer fiction? Just referencing LGBTQ, IA, and more fiction or books in general. And I was thinking about an anthology that somehow landed in my house when I was maybe 11 called Am I Blue? Does anyone remember this book? It was a book, a YA anthology of stories by Jackie Woodson, Jane Yolen, Francesca Leah Block. It was all like gay and lesbian stories for teens by these leading YA authors. And I remember I was just like so stunned by this book. I was so wowed that these authors I had heard of were writing these gay short stories. And I can still remember like the details of a lot of these stories. Yeah, I see someone else remembers this book. I was trying to think who brought, like, did my parents buy
Cool.
me this? I don't know. I'm going to have to inquire with them later. Yeah. Do you remember a first queer book that you read, Katie?
Yeah, I feel like I did not have an experience growing up reading queer books. I came out in college, and when I grew up, I'm half Japanese, and I really didn't have, I really didn't read anything that felt like it reflected my experience. I think like the closest I got was reading The Babysitter's Club, and there was Claudia, but she was like really into a certain kind of fashion, whereas I just wore like one pair of stretch pants and the same shirt, like, my whole entire childhood. So I don't, what I do now is I read a lot of books that I think, oh, I wish I had had this growing up. Like I think of Honor Girl, which is a graphic novel by Maggie Thrash, and that's a book that I sort of, set at a summer camp where she's realizing that she might be gay, and that's a book that I wish I had had growing up. So I think what I do now as an adult is read a lot of adult fiction, nonfiction, and also YA and middle grade queer books to think, oh man, I wish I would have had this, but it's also still helpful for me to have now.
Yeah. I see someone mentioned Stone Butch Blues by Leslie Feinberg as a book that was influential to them. Yeah, someone else is saying that too.
Yes.
I just read Stone Butch Blues for the first time last year, and I feel like that is one of them. Speaking of like formative books, that book blew my mind. And I've been thinking about it a lot lately with sort of the protests and organizing going on because that's such an interesting book about organizing too. Um, it's
Yes.
a it's a story of someone growing up and coming to terms with their gender identity in a lot of different forms and stages across their life. And the main character is a union organizer um, for a lot of their adult career. It's a
Hmm.
totally amazing book, and I would encourage anyone to go out and read it. It really blew my mind.
Yeah. I think one thing that is, I mean, classic, queer book. I'm so glad that that has come up. And I think another thing that I find myself doing as a queer adult is reading books that aren't even necessarily queer and finding, um, things that reflect different questions that I have or have had in my experience. Like I think of Heavy by Kiese Layman, which
Mm.
is, I mean, just one of my favorite books that I've read in recent years. And, that's not necessarily a queer book, but he explores the sort of these questions around his relationship to his body and to a history of sexual violence and to the way that his body is experienced by the world. And I think a lot of those a lot of those pieces I can really relate to as a queer person who has had a different and sort of evolving relationship with my own body and the way that the world experiences my body. Like I used to have, up until, I don't know, 6 months ago or maybe less, I had very, very long hair. And I think that, that gave me a certain read in the world, and I recently cut all my hair off and then I've had a really different experience that way. Anyway, so I think it's also interesting to read books that ask really interesting questions about identity and belonging and community and our relationships with our bodies and how those change, even if they're not necessarily queer. And, of course, as queer people who have often, not had a lot of representation, I think we can be very good at finding ourselves in stories that have, where none of the circumstances or details are actually the same as our own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see someone commented that sometimes they feel like, let me see if I can go back to the comment. Often there are queer characters or there are Asian characters. We have to choose which one of our identities we want represented.
Such a good point.
Yeah, and that especially with marginalized identities, that sometimes you feel like it has to be about one or the other. One can't have their sexuality and their race represented and celebrated in the same time on a book.
Yes, that is so true. And I'll just give a shout out to Long Live the Tribe of Fatherless Girls by Takira Madden, who is also a biracial person like me and is also queer. And I've been listening to that book on audiobook, which I think it can be really special to listen to some of the queer books in the world on audiobook if they're read by the author. I think that can be it can be just really powerful to hear somebody's own voice telling their story.
Yeah. Just as I'm looking at these comments, there's so many books. I want to write down a list afterwards of the ideas of books that are coming down. Ones I've read, ones I haven't read. So that's exciting.
A lot of great suggestions.
Yeah. I see people also have questions about sort of writing and publishing in general. What was your path? I don't actually know. What was your first job in publishing? What was your path into?
My first job in publishing was at a big talent agency in the book department. And I grew up in a small town in New Hampshire and didn't have, when I was growing up too, internships were unpaid and that was not something I could afford. So I didn't graduate from college having any experience in the publishing world. And I felt sort of, I felt a little inadequate and some feelings of fraudulence and I don't know what I'm doing, a lot of that. And I wound up at this big talent agency because I was part of this program at the college that we actually both went to that was for women who were graduating who had no professional female role models in their personal lives. And they matched you with a mentor. Mine worked in TV, which I really had no interest in, but she knew about the sort of entertainment world. And so she suggested that I applied in the mailroom of this big talent agency. And I joined in. Everyone, in the mailroom, which is where most people start, was really interested in a lot of these more Hollywood esque divisions. And I was, the book nerd in that room, and sort of worked my way up through there to eventually become a literary agent. But it was, it was certainly not something that I did not have any experience of. I mean, I didn't even know what an agent was when I started there, so that's how I landed in the industry. I'd certainly, thought I know that I like books and publishing, but I didn't have any connections. I didn't, I think I applied online to a bunch of different publishing houses, but never heard back. It felt like a very sort of sending emails into the void type of experience for me. What was your experience, Caitlin?
I knew I wanted to work with books in some capacity. I've always been a reader above all else. That's what I love to do. I love to read. So I thought when I was getting close to the end of college, I thought I could be an English teacher, or I could be a librarian, or I could work in publishing. And I thought, okay, well, publishing is kind of the hardest one, the one not the hardest job by any means, but the one that there's not as clear of a career path in. I figured I could just go back to school if I wanted to be a teacher or a librarian. So I thought I would try the one I don't have to go back to school for first. And my little sister never went to college, so she was always kind of ahead of me in life things. So she was living in New York City, and I was able to crash in her apartment and sort of try to figure out how to get work. So that was really lucky because I had a place to live as I pursued this sort of challenging, expensive city job. And I spoke French, and I heard of a job in publishing called Scouts, which are people that connect American books with foreign publishers. They try to tell the foreign publishers like what the hot things in America are. So I thought, oh, maybe a lot of college students haven't heard of Scouts, and I can just like cold email these people and say, hi, like my name's Caitlin and I speak French. So I did that, which I'm sure was like totally ridiculous, but a couple of them wrote back, and then they helped me look for jobs in publishing. And I also started out in an agency. You know, for those of you who don't know, literary agents are the business representatives of authors, and the editors and agents are sort of the two sides of the publishing equation.
Yeah, I sort of think of agents as the sellers and editors as the buyers, and both are super important to an author's career path.
Yeah. And then eventually we both left the agency side to come to publishing, come to editing. And I came to editing because I was looking for a team of people to all care about a book at the same time. To me, agenting was a little isolating. It's you and your author fighting to get the book you believe in published. And I really responded to editing, one, because I love editing on a page, and two, because I love the idea of having all these people who are way smarter than me in a lot of areas, all caring about the same thing. So, you know, the art designer, the publicist, the marketing person, it's very invigorating for me to work together with people on a book that I care about.
Yeah. And I saw somebody here asked a great question about, you know, sort of the evolution of LGBTQ representation in YA fiction, and how has that changed from the perspective of a publishing house. And I just wanted to say that, you know, when I started in this industry about 11 years ago, and I think this is similar to Caitlin, I was, you know, my priority was to represent folks who didn't necessarily have a voice in the world of books. And, you know, I joined Dial Press in September, and so I'm pretty new here. And my mandate and the reason why I joined and why it was so exciting to me is because they wanted somebody who was going to be able to publish LGBTQ books. That's my main focus. That's what I'm here to do. And, you know, that idea that there might be a position or an imprint that would prioritize LGBTQ voices and say, this is something that we want to have this happen, and we're creating a position around it, and it's important to us. I mean, I can't even have imagined that 11 years ago. So, you know, I only have 11 years experience. You know, it's not 50 years of experience in the publishing world, but I think a lot has changed, especially in the sort of second half of that decade, in the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, and Katy, would you say, as someone who's worked on both the YA and the adult side, that change sort of happened first or faster on the children and YA side? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question. Totally. Yeah, I worked when I was an agent. So here at the Dial Press, I work on adult fiction, nonfiction, memoir, and
I work on the adult side of things too, just to be transparent about that.
Yes. And when I was an agent, I represented across all ages, like Caitlin is saying. So that's adult and nonfiction, fiction as well. And then YA, middle grade, and in picture books. And one of the authors I represented, named Jacqueline Woodson, who's an amazing award-winning writer, has written across all of those age groups. So it was, she's kind of an awesome access point to think about somebody who can publish in different ages. And I certainly saw that there was more traction when it came to diverse voices in the younger spaces first. I just saw that there was more interesting stuff happening there, folks willing to take more risks, and you know, and that's sort of also why I was excited to join the Dial Press in the adult space and say, you know, as an agent, I was able to really see books sell in the middle grade and young adult space that were written by the kinds of authors that I would love to work with. And as an agent, when I would try to sell, sometimes I felt like I couldn't find that traction. So to be on this side now, I thought, well, I can be that traction. You know, I can be the person, you know, similar to Caitlin, who says, yes, I do see myself in this, even if all the circumstances are different. Yes, I believe in this story. Yes, I think it's worthy. So I do think that there was a lot more movement initially in the young adult, middle grade spaces, and hopefully the two of us and many other, you know, editors who are thinking about things the same way as us are trying to help, you know, carry that energy forward. But we can look at those young adult, middle grade, and children's spaces for guidance, I think.
Yeah, and the readers who grow up seeing more diverse characters in their books are going to be the adult readers of the future, who, whether they're queer or not in their own identity, are used to and excited to see different faces and voices in the books they read for pleasure. So I think I look forward to that. I see, we'll just say this, I'm Caitlin McKenna. And this is Katy
I'm Katy
Nishimoto
Nishimoto, Dial Press.
from Random House, for those of you who have joined us. I see a question. What do you think editors are looking for from queer writers in South Asia? Because there are too many issues to be addressed in a single book, and not everything would work universally. Totally. I mean, I don't know what Katy would say, but I would say I think nothing has to work universally. That's what's really magic about a book. Uh, I don't when I go to look for a book to acquire for Random House or a book that I myself want to read, I'm not looking for something that's going to appeal to everyone. I don't believe that such a book exists. I think what's great about reading is that I can love something and Katy cannot be interested in it. Katy can think something is like a total page turner and I can put it down after 20 pages. I think there's such a range of readers out there. And part of having so many different editors acquiring for a house like Random House or Dial means we have all these different tastes at play.
Yeah.
So I don't think a book, oops, I'm trying to look at this comment again. I don't think a book needs to encompass every issue in a book. And I don't think a book has to appeal to everyone. I think the writer needs to find the issue or the character or the voice that really speaks to them that they can bring to life, and trust that that book is going to find its right audience, that there's an audience out there for that book. And the audience might not be everyone, but the audience is going to care about that story and that character.
Yeah, I'd also say, I encourage you to not worry too much, to the writers out there, to not worry too much about, is my story going to be universal? Because in my experience, the more specific you can get with your story, the more universal it
Yeah.
is. Because what we relate to as readers is not necessarily, oh, I, had the same exact experience. Like, I will level with you. This, whatever. I'm reading Outlander by Diana Gabaldon for, like, I've read it before. I'm reading it again. And, this is a story about a woman in the 1940s and she travels back in time. Okay, 200 years. It's in the Scottish Highlands. Okay. Anyway, I'm like, read that and I'm like, oh my God, this is the story of my life. And it's not the story of my life in any, like, no detail is the same. So, I think we relate to the feelings and the experiences. And that's what makes a story universal,
Yeah.
not the circumstances, the specifics.
Yeah, definitely. And I see someone else asking, what character have you been missing in your last few reads?
That's a good question.
I would maybe more generally than my last few reads, but I mean, I love, speaking of sort of queer fiction in general, I love when we see queer characters coming, and not only like realistic coming of age stories. I think there's like a genre crossover. Like Sarah Waters, I feel like was one of the first lesbian writers that I loved as a teenager, because it was, you got the whole historical element and it was so sexy, and it was lesbian. So, or I'm thinking of River Solomon, is a sci-fi writer who wrote, what's the name of that book? An Inconvenience of Ghosts. Anyways, it's a queer trans generation ship sci-fi novel that is totally amazing. So I like when a character shows up in a world or a place I'm not expecting to see them necessarily.
I think that's such a good question that this person asked. And I think
Yes,
I'm
thank you,
always
Elizabeth.
really,
An Unkindness of Ghosts. It's so good.
okay, yeah, there you go, Elizabeth. I think one thing that I'm always looking and interested in is are stories that explore being a mixed race person, who didn't, I didn't know I was gay until, at the end of college. I'm really interested in stories where I see mixed race people who are sort of sitting in between a lot of different identities. Like, that to me is super interesting. And, having grown up in a small town in New Hampshire and then like living in a city and, working in a company where I was surrounded by fame and fortune and all of that, and feeling like, I didn't even know that summer could be a verb, just, I really like these questions of sort of different identities. And I also, one thing that I have been missing are stories of a character who is not necessarily at the end of the book landing on this is my identity and this is how I shall go forth in the world. But in my experience, those questions are ongoing, and who we are is always changing. And I think I'm interested in hearing and getting to know a character who might be saying, I thought this is who I am, and now I think this is who I am, and now, I still have these questions about myself, and that the questions and that process of questioning is valid and important and interesting just as much, as maybe landing on an answer.
Yeah, I love that. And that's sort of part of the joy of being an editor. One of the joys of being an editor is you get to sort of be close to an author as they are exploring those questions in that journey in a book. You can sort of see
Hmm.
someone actually grappling with molding identity on the page in a way that's, I feel like it's a privilege to get to see these curious, really smart minds
Hmm.
shaping this live in front of you. So yeah.
Yeah.
What books have you acquired so far for Dial? Anything we should keep our eye out for?
Yes, I want to mention one book in particular, which I'm super excited about. And this is a memoir by an amazing writer named Gabe Montesanti. And you will all be hearing more and more about her as time goes on. And she has written the most incredible memoir. It's called Brace for Impact, where she is asking a lot of these questions around identity. And she grew up in a very conservative Midwestern town and had a very difficult time coming out in a traumatic upbringing. And she moved to St. Louis and joined a roller derby team with no experience, and having, sort of no idea what to do. And, I personally related to that a lot because when I moved to New York, I joined a rugby team without ever having played rugby and really found community there. And it's sort of, a queer wild in some ways, where there's this trajectory of her emotional trajectory where she sort of finds safety and a sense of self and a sense of identity and belonging as she works through this very physically challenging sport, and asking these questions related to her relationship with her body and her real core sense of self. So that's Brace for Impact by Gabe
Mm.
Montesanti, and she's working on it right now. She is fantastic, and that memoir will be coming out in a couple of years. So keep your eye out for that one from the Dial Press. What about you,
Really cool.
Caitlin?
I have two novels that have been on my mind lately. One's coming out next year. It's called Detransition Baby by Tori Peters. Um, and it is the story of a trans woman who's in her 30s in New York. She kind of just is in and out of bad relationships with bad guys, and she's approached by her ex, who has gotten another woman pregnant, and asks her if she wants to raise the baby with them. So it's this love triangle of should we have this baby or shouldn't we, and what kind of family could we be if the three of us chose to do this together. It's really, really funny, really moving, and Tori's amazing. So I'm excited for that. That's next summer. And then maybe I have too many baby books now, but I had a baby this year, so maybe I have baby books on the mind. But I have a book by a woman named Mia McKenzie, who had a website called Black Girl Dangerous for a long time that was trying to be a literary home for queer and trans voices of color. And this is her second novel. Her first novel is called The Summer We Got Free. It's like a Philadelphia family lesbian ghost drama, and it's amazing. But her new novel is about a woman also in her 30s whose life is kind of a mess, but she doesn't care. She likes it that way. And she's approached by a 12-year-old who says that she's the product of eggs the woman donated in her early 20s, and she wants a relationship with this woman. And the main character has to decide whether to, the first time in her life, like stay in one place and try to make a relationship with this kid, and in doing so fix things with her mom and her ex and her best friend and all the people that she's never really tried to solidify her relationship with. So those are my two baby books of the next 2 years that I'm really, really crazy about.
Yeah, I'm excited for those.
Yeah. I saw one other question that was interesting. Oh, what should writers look for in an editor-writer relationship, and what do you look for as an editor? And I think this is a really important question, because I think a lot of times the power gets talked about in editors' hands. Like, what does the editor want? Like, what can I do to get the editor's attention? But I do really think it's important for writers to be really vocal and representative for their own needs and what they look for in that relationship, which isn't the same for everyone. But I think you really want to feel like your book is safe in someone's hands, that they respect what
Hmm.
you're trying to do, they respect your characters, and that they are someone you're going to be able to form a relationship of trust with, that you can be you can push each other, you can both push each other. Like when I edit a book, I always give too many thoughts and ideas, and I hope that I have the trust of the author that they know that they can say no to a lot of them. Like they trust
Hmm.
them being the best, most careful reader possible, but also that I trust that they're the writer and they know what is right for their book, and that they're going to accept some things and they're going to reject some things, and that's going to create the product that we're all hoping for.
Yeah, I think that trust is super important. And I'd also say, as a writer, when you're looking for an editor, I think it's important to have someone who is asking you questions and providing suggestions and ideas that where you feel like, oh, this is a more honest and true version of this book or of this story or of this character. If you can find a partner, agent or editor, and hopefully both, who are helping you identify what is the truest, most honest version of this story and these characters, I think that is such an important thing to find in a creative partner.
Yeah, we are reaching the end of our time, but I don't know, Katie, are you doing anything for Pride from your isolation spot?
Well, I'm not sure yet. I am based in Los Angeles, and I have lived in New York for 10 years. So I only recently moved here, and I am immunocompromised, which means that my immune system doesn't work properly. And so with this pandemic going on, we all have to be very careful, and I have to be sort of extra conservative when it comes to making decisions about how to place myself in different physical spaces. So I think that I am trying to really pay attention and to what's going on and think what really makes sense for me as somebody who has sort of a body that works a little differently and but also really wants to celebrate Pride. So it's my first Pride in LA. And it's also my first Pride in the pandemic, which I'm sure is true for many of us. So I am not sure yet. I think it's one of these sort of day by day things. And I'll just say, for Pride right now, I'm on vacation and I haven't taken vacation in a long time. And part of my Pride is saying, like, I want to take some time to myself and go on vacation with my girlfriend and, have my short haircut and be out in a place, that where I don't know anybody and say like, I still want to find joy and wonder and awe and beauty in the world as a queer person and do what's right for me. So that's like sort of my mini Pride for today. What about you, Caitlin?
Um, yeah, I definitely is trying to figure out how to do that during the pandemic is tough. I don't know. I guess I kissed my new baby and my wife a million times this month, and
Yeah.
we're trying to find ways to, in a way that we feel comfortable with the people we live with, go out to support the protests, especially for Black trans lives,
Yeah.
and being a physical and financial part of that as much as we can.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so many great questions we didn't get to. So I hope this is a conversation we can all keep having and keep going with, via this platform and others. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Follow us on Instagram at Random House and at the Dial Press. And if there are other questions, you can always send us a comment,
Hmm.
post a comment or whatever, and we'll try to answer them as best possible. I know that both of us are always trying to really sort of think, break down the barriers of access to the publishing world and the world of storytelling and books. So we're here for that, and so glad that you all could join us.
Thank you all, and have a great day and great Pride. Bye.
Happy Pride, everyone. Bye bye.